This all started just a few weeks ago. My acting professor had my classmates and I perform at his friend's community theater in a place called High Street. Not to leave out semi-important details, they already had an hour-long play, but needed their show to be longer. My classmates and I were a completely different play, but Act 2 regardless. This gave us an entire hour in the makeup room behind the stage, and our performances would show for 4 weekends. This was not my first time at the theater, as I had performed there in my freshman year of college. However, now as I return in my senior year, it is the rest of the cast's first time here. The first night, one of the girls in the cast started freaking out about what was happening on her phone. The makeup room was a pretty crummy location, so no one had service. This girl, we'll call her Shay, kept claiming that her phone was opening tabs all by itself. The first day of the first week, no one believed her, but the second day, she held it in her hands without touching the screen, and sure enough, it was opening things by itself. I thought it was just because of the room's location, but other people who had the same phone didn't experience what she was going through. There were also little things that gave the air a certain nerve to it, like my text to Shay would always come out distorted, but only when she was in the makeup room. And another girl, named Nilly, said that she heard an older woman singing softly, but it didn't match up with anyone in either cast. The most consistent thing, though, stood the mystery of Shay's phone. A lot of the cast joked about it, but Shay herself was always a little jumpy and easily frightened. I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in a spiritual realm, so I was a little on edge about the place being infested with evil spirits or something. When you're in theater, though, you hear all kinds of superstitions, and I don't believe in that either. So I held my head high, reassured everyone and Shay that there is nothing to worry about, and quietly prayed that God would guard our hearts and minds. One day, I was feeling particularly nervous and renounced in Jesus' name whatever spirit may be lingering about. The second week, it began opening her text messages and typing things of its own, though it would stop before it would ever enter anything. Except one time. One instance, it opened Shay's text message as we all watched, foolishly entertained. It began typing and the word it wrote out was, "we." At this point, some other cast members still thought it was funny, but I thought it was eerie as olives, and it honestly reminded me of the story of Legion in the Bible. Shay was on the same page as me, thinking there was more than one spirit living in the theater and messing with her phone. I prayed every day while we were there. I wasn't terribly frightened, but I was really concerned for the spiritual well-being of my friends and everyone else who stepped foot in the place. One of the performances of the same weekend, Shay and I asked the Act 1 cast if their phones were acting weird or glitchy like hers. That cast had much older people, with the exception of the 2 young leads, a guy and a girl, who were alumni of our college. None of them had anything to say except the girl, who said that she believed there were 3 spirits in the theater. The first one, an elderly man who was allegedly run over by the train tracks, literally diagonal of the theater. She said he was always up in the rafters and didn't really bother people much. The second one, an older Hungarian woman who was always on the stage, perhaps the voice that Nilly heard. Shay and I were obligated to give the diva joke in an attempt to laugh it off until the girl went on and said that the third ghost was a little girl who always resided in the makeup room. She said a few years ago, when she was in the theater's production of Les Miserables, there were kids involved, and during a rehearsal, she saw one silhouette up in the rafters, but all of the kids in the cast were on the stage and accounted for. She pointed to the door that led from the makeup room to backstage and explained this strange pair of gray child-sized fingerprints. They were pretty low on the door and weren't there before Les Miserables. More than that, all of the kids in the cast were taller than where the fingerprints were, so it wouldn't make sense for them to push the door that low, and they would naturally push it about chest height. All of this freaked Shay out. Even as I recall this, I think it's really creepy, but I have faith that my God will protect us. I reassured Shay once again that everything would be okay, and just not to look at her phone or something. Of course, living in the digital age, it was exceedingly hard for Shay to put her phone away or turn it off until our part of the show began. She began making light of the situation, naming the little girl Sky, and prompting her phone to type by itself again alongside everyone else. I joked about it a couple of times too, but felt very convicted that this wasn't the righteous thing to do. Shay started talking to Sky, as if she was in the closet of the makeup room or under this one part of the counter. Whenever someone went to sit under the counter, she would always joke about how we shouldn't sit there, because that was Sky's spot. She said she was joking about it, but you could tell she was serious. The third weekend came, and this was actually my last full weekend, as I had to go on a trip and would be absent for the last 2 performance days. Shay was understudying one of my roles, and the freshman in our cast was covering the other one. Shay had been shaky on her lines a few times, but I just assumed it was because she was really shaken up about the whole Sky thing. Shay continued to address Sky as if she was there, as if she was her tulpa or something, and her phone began doing other things. Now, it had always distorted my text messages to her while in the theater, but that was only after I had recently sent them. Now, it would open up her text messages and distort certain texts or parts of the text from everyone who had recently contacted her. It put the messages in gibberish or code, sometimes weird symbols that didn't exist. It was getting weird, but the weirdest thing about this was that Shay wasn't even scared anymore. The other cast members made up stories about Sky, that she was a lonely little girl who lost her mother and tried to find that motherly quality in someone who would enter the theater. But Shay was 20, only a year younger than me. Why was all of this happening to her and no one else? To me, it seemed as if this thing made them scared of certain things to the point of not looking back. This whole performance at High Street had been shoved at us last minute. I had a 4-page monologue to memorize in the span of 2 weeks before opening night, and the other cast members were each in 2 scenes with lots of dialogue. We were all nervous about messing up, especially because it was some people's first time performing. Like every show, we each messed up a little bit here and there, but I noticed that a couple of other actors would quickly hush each other if they said aloud anything that they had messed up. They told me that if they dwelled on it, that Sky would acknowledge it and punish them. While I liked that they didn't dwell on any mistakes, it was riddled in fear, and I knew that deep in their minds they were terrified of something that, for all we knew, wasn't even there. They all put on fake smiles and confident attitudes, masking their terror by joking about the situation. Some other actors even took it outside of High Street and said that if they focused on how badly they did on a test at school, that Sky would be there somehow, so they decided not to look back. Now, I told my professor that this theater ghost mumbo-jumbo had everyone uppity, and it was perhaps the reason why we had a couple of mistakes in our performances. But he told everyone that the theater ghost stuff was all just nonsense and that we needed to focus on our lines. Those who were afraid, which was the majority of the cast, all agreed and said they couldn't look back. My last show came and went. I went on my trip, had a great time, and came back home. I asked how the last couple of performances were, and my cast members said they all went well for the most part. I asked Shay about her Sky problem, but she said nothing had happened. After talking with her some more, I realized that she meant that she didn't know what I was talking about. She had completely forgot about Sky and her issues with her phone at High Street. At this point, I'm thinking, what in the world happened? I asked the other actors, and they seemed to acknowledge Sky, but said they had to whisper about it and not look back. I'm terrified for the mental and spiritual health of my friends. What if they were really oppressed by some evil spirit or something? Was I the only one who was being crazy? I pray constantly, asking for guidance and protection over myself, my family, my friends, and the people who worked in the theater. Even now, as I share my story with you, I feel especially nervous all over again, as if something bad will happen once I finish this story. As if there's a little girl standing behind me. Dear God, please help me to guard my heart and keep me safe from harm and evil. I want to turn around, but I'm afraid. I don't want to see whatever is there, if there's anything at all. I keep reassuring myself that it's okay as long as I just keep facing forward, as long as I don't acknowledge anything, it'll be okay. I just have to keep myself from looking back.